Hey guys, it's Charlie here, the host of the Agency Valley podcast, and today I'm bringing you a different episode. I really wanted to touch on the dark side of scaling an agency quickly. I really feel like scaling an agency fast has been glorified by the market, and a lot of people think that, if I can just scale and grow more quickly, that's really going to solve all my problems. So me and the wonderful Kim Barrett of Your Social Voice decided to really talk about our own experiences in scaling an agency quickly and really the repercussions and dark side of scaling an agency fast. So I hope you will listen to this episode. I hope you will learn from the big mistakes both myself and Kim made when it came to our agencies. And I hope this episode saves you some of the pain that so many go through with fast growth. So that's enough from me. If you do like this episode, please make sure to like and subscribe to the show, and please share it with the other agency owners out there. Hello, agency owners. It's Charlie here, the host of the Agency Valley podcast, and today I am joined by, I'm going to call you my co-host now, with how many episodes you come on here for. We're going to say Kim Barrett, the one and only co-host. How are you, Kim?
I'm doing super well, Mr. Charlie, sir. How you doing?
Well, I've missed you, in all honesty. So, listeners of the show, Kim's actually been away in the Maldives. His sister was getting married, which is awesome, but that meant no podcast time for us.
It feels like I haven't seen you in so long. But look, the Maldives did come in a close second to Charlie Valor.
Hey, I'm happy with that. I'll take that. I'll really take that. I think it's worthy. Now, we've got what I would call an interesting topic, a really, really interesting topic today, which is the dark side of scaling an agency fast. Now, I think both of us have experienced this and really, really felt, I'm going to call the pain and frustration of it, where I feel like in the marketplace and what I hear from most people is like they almost think this is the answer. Like everyone wants to scale an agency quickly without kind of thinking through the other side of it. And I'm really hopeful that on this episode, this is what we're going to be able to shed some light on and essentially prepare people for.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important because, like you said, it can be portrayed as the answer. It's like, cool, if you've got all these problems, just grow really fast. When in reality, there's a lot of things that come out of that may cause problems and may cause you to come back down equally as fast, if not faster.
Yeah, I completely agree. What I would love, Kim, why don't you tell, I've got a story on this, but I'm sure you've got a story as well. So why don't you tell me your story about quickly scaling and I suppose the downsides and even the upsides of it?
Yeah, for sure. I think the upside is relatively easy to start off with because we kind of joked off air before, but really the biggest thing, only thing that really goes up is probably your ego a little bit. When you're growing fast, you've got more money coming in, new clients, you're getting results, things start to happen and you're like, oh, wow, like maybe I am as awesome as my mum always said I was, but sometimes that's also not the case.
Just walk around, 7-figure agency owner here.
Right? Exactly. You make yourself your own little badge and everything. But I think that's probably the biggest thing that I noticed was definitely the big things was obviously increase in money coming in, income, lots of things happening. But I'll tell a little story. I remember there was one, and it was when we were in a fast growth phase, and we took on a client, and at that point, I think one of the things is that you do start to feel not invincible, but like any client that comes to you, easy, no worries, done, be able to scale that. Yeah, we'll get that going. And they were like an ASX listed company, and it was a big e-commerce platform, and they had a ton of products. And I was like, already been doing some e-commerce, getting good results. It's like, yeah, it's going to be easy. Of course, sign them up for a fair chunky retainer. It was like $7,000 a month, I think it was. And this was in start of November. And I was like, yeah, cool, all going to be good. And we started running things, and I was like, I had a small team at the time, a team that probably wasn't really big enough for the amount of work that we were going to be doing for this client, because they were already busy, right? I'd been making other sales and other clients come on board. And we started working on it, and we started scaling things as they wanted. And I didn't realize beforehand, I didn't do a proper scope of what was going to be needed. But the amount of work that started to come out, and this was just now leading into November, December, into Christmas, I was like, oh my God, right? This is just going to be way, way, way too much. I started to get, when I get stressed, I get these stress kind of like marks or like things on my hands, and I can tell, and I'm just like, oh, started to get that, hair started to go grey. This is all, no one can see this, but my hair's dyed now. I have to keep it nice colour.
Just for the listeners of the show, you may not be, we're actually on video, me and Kim, and I'm just looking at our grey receding hairlines, and I'm certain by the end of this episode, you'll know where they came from.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So all these things started to happen, and I was like, oh my God, this is just going to be too hard. I'm not going to have a Christmas. They wanted to say things on Boxing Day, all this sort of stuff to happen. And I was like, the two big things that I took away as it started to get closer was like, number one, I didn't scope it properly because I started to feel like I was invincible and I could take on any client. Right. And I think, a sidebar lesson is like, the bigger you grow, the more things you should say no to. I think, right? And the more things that you should spend more time deciding if you want to take it versus saying yes to everything, because more and more opportunities come out of the woodwork, and you're like, oh, yes. And it's like, oh, hang on. Because after doing the scope, I should have been able to realize that our team size was not big enough to properly fulfill on it. And I was just getting stressed. I was overworking. I was working, 26 hours a day, 2 hours while I was sleeping. That's the extra 26.
Taking some double hours, like two hands going.
Exactly. A laptop and a PC at the same time. So I was getting all these things happening, and I was like, okay, this is not what I signed up for, right? This is not what I wanted to have happen when I was growing. So then I had to learn my next big learning, which was about how to fire a client. Up until that point, I'd never had to fire anyone before. So I had to let this client go because I wasn't going to be able to do the job that I originally signed up to do. Like I'd done a good job or okay job so far, but it wasn't really what they deserved. So then I had to basically fire them and pass them on to another person who I know could do a tremendous job for them. But I then dealt with obviously the decrease in income that obviously I'd already taken into a consideration also by not having them come on for the next month. So many things happened because I thought, number one, I can just take on any client and get them results. But number two, I didn't properly scope them out and then realize that I could say no. Like at that time, no was not in my vocabulary. It was like, cool, you want to get these things done, we will do it or figure out a way, which was like not good, but it's like we did get a lot of learning and benefit from that. But also we also had the downside because we were growing, and it's like, okay, well now I kind of had to plateau and recalculate how we did things, how we onboarded people, my sales process, all that sort of stuff, which up until that point, if I didn't have that, like I don't know if I would have got as many learnings and put as many future things into place that I did after that happening. Yeah,
I really resonate with that. It's like to loop in, it's like the ego kicks in the confidence, and that confidence is dangerous, in all honesty.
100% for you and for clients you bring on board as well, because obviously there's your side, but you really shouldn't bring on clients that unless you know properly, like not ego no, but know properly that you can suffice for them. So for me, that was like a really big learning. As we were scaling very fast. I was like, oh, I had to like literally not put the handbrake on, but I had to slow down a bit and go, okay, why did this happen? Because of this. Okay, I need to change all of these things before I go not crazy, but yeah, before I go crazy again with making things happen. Because it's like, yeah, it was very, very stressful time. I remember, and I was like, literally felt sick. I don't think I ate for 2 days. It was like, oh, it was all stressful. And then when I realized that I could fire a client and then, do it in a good way where I could give them a recommendation onto someone else, like it made me feel so much less stressful and just much more relaxed.
You kind of get to this, I mean, I shouldn't say for you because I'll speak from my own terms, but you get to this point where it's like you dig yourself a hole into the growth, and then that ego locks you into like, well, I can't get rid of clients because I'm tied to that achievement. So it's like, I think you came up with a great solution there though, like passing a client on and learning to say no to that type of thing is very, very powerful.
Yeah, and I think if you don't, it becomes too hard. And like you say, because then if you like previously what I was doing in the growth as well, which was like, well, cool, we're bringing more clients on, which in my mind, every client's going to stay with me for at least, minimum 6 months, even though they may not. And then it's like, I'm bringing on people to help fulfill in the growth. But then it's like, well, if one of them drops off, then it's like, well, sometimes those people's wages have then like what's covering them, then it opens up a whole other can of worms.
Yeah. totally. Really, really agree with that. So interesting. Such an insight. I think there's a lot of lessons in what you just said there, Kim. There's a lot of really powerful things to think about. I kind of think back now and it's like, for me, I'm like in love with the idea of slow, sustainable growth. And I know that sounds so counterintuitive because, doing something big, it's exciting. There's a lot of excitement there.
Yeah, there is. And I think you get the adrenaline and everything. But yeah, going back, it's like, really, what's the rush? Right? Like it's like, yes, we all want growth. We want this, all the cool things that come with that. But really, being that, we're both, well, now officially in our 30s, in the 20s at the time. But it's like, well, really, if it takes an extra year, is that much of a problem? Not really. Like in the grand scheme of things, like, is it actually?
I don't know. I think it is. I'll be honest. I had something to prove to myself and to my partner. It's a really interesting thing. I think the people that scale quickly, right, the ones that come out there and they're just hungry and got something to prove, it is certainly something that will test you. And there is some, as we've said, some reward that comes from doing it. Like now, like from here, I'm like, couldn't care less. Slow, baby. Let's do it slow and profitably.
Yeah.
And sustainably is the big word there. But I really think that's probably more what I'm into now. But I would never be into this now without that experience.
Yeah, 100%. But now I'm very curious. I want to hear your story because I know it's going to be equally as entertaining.
Yeah, well, of course. I'm thrilled I can laugh about it now at the very least. I think the big one that come for me, right, was like I had, I'll say, cracked the code by some mysterious luck and had an influx of clients. I'd done a joint venture, followed up really well with some remarketing, and we had an influx of clients coming in. And to give you an idea is that we were doing I was reasonably early on with one staff member, doing about 10 grand a month. And then we pushed through to 50 grand a month, 60 grand a month, even up to 70 grand a month in the space of like 4 months. So this is like, quite month on month, like doubling, which was intense and awesome. And in the beginning, we were kind of pulling it off, which led to that overconfidence. It gave me no reason to say no or to stop. But then what happened is like the big thing I remember is that I realized it was like, okay, well, I need people to do this. I've got a limit on how many accounts I can look after. I was doing Facebook ads and Google ads. And I said, right, I'm going to hire people. I can see that I need 2 more people. If I can get one, I had a person looking after AdWords. If I could get a person to look after Facebook and a person to look after all the landing pages and tech and all that stuff, then we'll be right. So I just went out there and like blatantly hired 2 people. And like they were good people, but I didn't understand cash flow, right? So I didn't understand this concept of like what a burden it is to hire 2 people at that point. Because like I had one person, so like as well as like, doubling the amount of clients we had coming in, it's like, well, actually you just, 3x the amount of team you have. So when you have 1 to go to 3, that was a really, really painful step. And I mean, I won't sugarcoat it. I ran out of cash. So I had this business on the surface, which is scaling like mad on a fast track to become a 7-figure agency in a very, very short amount of time. But then like no money to pay myself, completely broke. Every cent that was coming in was going to the team. And it was because of the way we navigated the cash flow cycle and how we were starting work and when we were getting paid. And like, there's this whole thing in agency land, like of, you might get paid, but then when does the retainer start? And is there a setup fee? And like naively, I wasn't taking any setup fee. And we were just like, as soon as they were in, like gunning it. And I came unstuck. It took me months and months to undo that cash flow cycle. And I think, the irony is that ended up being one of my best lessons, because I learned so much about financial management of a business, which has been very, very helpful in doing everything else. But that experience, like the cash flow, I'll never forget that burden of like, how the fuck am I not making money? Like, where is the money? We're working so hard. I'm doing the Kim Barrett 26-hour day, and like, I don't have a cent to my name at the moment. So I mean, and this is the other side of it. I actually felt like a failure. I felt like I did the wrong thing. I even though I'd calculated, we had a good margin and all these things, because of the way I was onboarding and the resource it was taking to grow, like it was incredibly painful and stressful. And so I mean that was one of the big ones. The second side of that though was, in scaling so quickly. So in my story, like the big transition I was making was going from being on tools to just a client manager. So effectively, like if you got me at, when we was just at the start of that growth cycle, I was probably still doing the ads in the account. But by the end of hiring those two people, I was not doing any of the work in account. And like we were having, I don't want to say quality issues because that's not necessarily the best term, but like work was being done differently than how I was used to doing it. And like there certainly were differences between the accounts that I wasn't comfortable with. And I felt like it quite, I suppose this is something we hear all the time, used to shit me up the wall. And this episode is actually R-rated now by the amount of swearing that's going on. But it used to shit me up the wall. Like I was like, why can't they just do things like I do it? Like, why? Like, this is just so simple to me. You just put the account like this. I mean, Kim, am I just finding duds? Like, what is going on here? I mean,
I've never had that experience in my life, man. I have no idea what you're talking about. No, I know exactly what that's like. It's crazy. And as you say, I think as well, like when you go from it, when you go from doing it yourself. Like if we had probably both not been, if we were never on the tools, we probably wouldn't notice or know or be able to identify that difference. But because it's something that you did at the beginning, and I remember I think you told me this one time, it's like whenever you started out on something and that was what brought you in the money, it's one of the big things you always focus on when things aren't going right. You're like, oh, hang on, boom, this person's doing what I did. They didn't do it right. Why not? And this is what you tend to focus in on. It's just hilarious because, it's exactly what happens to me.
Well, Kim, I mean, I didn't have any processes or systems and I was a terrible manager and I've never managed a team before. I mean, why would this have gone wrong? I mean, that doesn't sound like a recipe for disaster at all.
Recipe for success, man. It can't go wrong. But I'm assuming, like, what are the other, I don't want to steal any thunder, but like, what were the positives that came out of that as well?
I think when I look back on the positives, so this is the thing, that experience, I think, I like to think of, because I won't call it a failure, because that experience really shaped me as a business owner though, because I wasn't even in tune to like how important like cash flow management or financial management of a business was. And like, that's when I got, we learned from pain. I was never going to read a book on financial management. I was in so much pain, I just didn't want to be here anymore. And then the second side of it is this is what led me into processes and systems and like how to run teams. So like this experience ended up the best teacher of like what not to do in these areas. Because the only solution at this point was just me diving headfirst into fixing things. And I think people have heard me reference this many times. Is like I used to joke and say I ran an adult daycare center. Because that's what it felt like. But that was how we navigated through it, was just like getting in the trenches, getting out of the cash flow cycle, learning how to create systems around things so we could get standardization. And like a lot of good came from the experience, but certainly a burden in that, scaling an agency fast.
Well, I think as well, it's not like there's literally there kind of is now if you know where to look for it and how to find it, but there's not really a agency handbook or even a online business handbook going, cool, you've just started a business and you're doing stuff on the internet. Here are all the things that you need to know, you need to be aware of. Like even, I went to university and studied marketing, management, all that sort of stuff. Not really did I see much of all the things that I actually needed when I was running or managing in a business. Like there was some team management, some leadership aspects that we learned, but really the things that I needed, like you say, like the cash flow management, the financial cycles, the team growth, the conflict resolution, proper aspects of like that, you're not learning, or there wasn't ways or places to learn it, especially when it's like when I was at university, no one was running a Facebook agency. And then I had a Facebook agency. Okay, cool. Well, kind of who do I ask? What do I do to make sure that this grows? It was still really the early days, and similar for yourself as well, because we're going through at similar times.
Oh, we were in the Wild West. I'm sure of it. Like I often joke is like, how many people can say they were around for when Google AdWords had 1 cent keywords? Or who could say they were around when the thing to do on Facebook ads was red borders?
Yeah,
just a minute, you did it as well.
They were great. I went with orange. It was a polarizing color to the Facebook blue.
Yeah, and so I mean, absolutely, we're in a very different time. But I look at it and go, we probably wouldn't have had these experiences if we weren't in on that cusp as well. There was a lot of reward that came from it. But even then, would you have been open to this information? Like, would you have been open if someone had sat you down and said, hey, you need to learn financial management, probably one of the most boring subjects that exists in business?
Yeah. No, well, again, you don't know. It's you're unaware of it. It's like, oh, nah, like I know how to spend money and make it. And, I know you got to pay it sometimes to the government. That's all right. Like, unless you have that pain, you don't know that. It's like, cool. You hurt your lower back now that you're an old person in your 30s, and you're like, okay, cool, there's all these things I have to do now. Before, someone was teaching me all this stuff about how to properly rehabilitate and fix my back. I'll be like, nah, it's all right. I'm young, I'm in my mid-20s, I'm relatively healthy, there's no problem. But now, when I sprain my, compress a disc, you're like, oh, okay, all the things I did before I probably shouldn't do. But,
dude, when I used to go to the gym when I was 20, my warm-up was thinking about gym while driving to the gym.
Yeah,
that is the warm-up. And it's like now it's like, 15 minutes of yoga. We're going to get the foam roller out. Got to work on these imbalances. And I'm like, oh, wow. So this is 30. Got to do a cool down.
But again, we wouldn't look at it unless you had as you say, like you get initiated. And I wish it was different. And I'm sure there's some people that it is for, but we all kind of react as like something goes wrong, then we know we need to fix it, right? Like I wish that most of us didn't have that aspect and we could fix it before, but sometimes you need it to wake you up.
Well, I think the experience, how can I put this? We're talking about the downsides here, but it's like, I almost think this is an experience that's worth having. I really do. I mean, a lot of it sucks, but it really forms you as a business owner.
Yeah. But if you're an agency listening to this, please do learn from our mistakes. Don't go, okay, Kim, they go learn from it. Start pissing into the wind. Nah, please don't listen to some of our mistakes we've led from. But yeah, I definitely think it was something that has helped a lot, taught me a lot. Which again, I would we probably wouldn't be sitting here talking about it if we wouldn't be doing what we're doing now if we didn't have those experiences.
Well, I'm going to use an extreme example here, right? But if you think of the Navy SEALs, right, when they do the Hell Week. The whole point of that is to show someone of what they're really possible of and really break down any limiting belief in the mind. They put them through something so extreme that they just go, well, everything's bullshit.
Yeah. Are we going to create an agency Hell Week? We just take all the money from their bank accounts, fire half their staff, and just go deal with it, guys. Come on. Give me 10 new clients. 10 new websites. Push up.
Well, but there's a little bit of merit in doing hard things. I think there's great value in stretching yourself. But, yeah, I think you can definitely not go to the extremes we've both gone to here.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Oh, how funny. So now we're starting Agency Hell Week. Guys, you heard it here first. Next.
Click the button below, guys. It's register.
So I'll ask you a different question then, Kim. It's like, if you could go back, what would you do differently? And part 2 of that is that if you're an agency owner that hasn't experienced this, what are you looking out for? What are the signs?
Well, I think for me, and again, agency, I'll start with the second question first. I think for me is keeping properly keeping my finger on the pulse. We've talked about this in other podcasts before, for example, reporting, dashboarding, etc. I think that when you start to feel that confidence, when you start to feel that you're flying, you're taking off, that's exactly when you need to kind of revert back and double down and be aware of everything. Because I feel like when you take off, you're kind of if you imagine you're driving, your eyes start to lift up from the road. You're like, we're going into the sky now. But there's many things on that road that are still going to happen. So I think that if you can make sure that when you do feel that momentum and things moving forward, that's when you're triple checking everything. That's when you're keeping your eyes across all of your key metrics, your key numbers, your dashboards, your information of your team, making sure you're checking in with people more regularly. That's what I would tell to myself is going, cool, yes, things are going well. However, there was I think there was a post and I put on my Instagram story the other day from Russell Brunson. It's like always be prepared or always be expecting the worst case scenario. I think it was like words similar to that, but I think it's like cool when you look at it, go what could go wrong now, and then prepare for that and start looking at those areas, because in 9 times out of 10 it won't go wrong, but it's the 1 time out of 10 where it does and catches you unaware. Whereas like if you're preparing for those things, like if there's a zombie apocalypse and you've been preparing for it, great. If there's not, you look like a crazy person. But right, if you're watching all these things as they're going along and you're going, I'm prepared for that, keeping my eyes out, I'm paying attention, then I think it just puts you in much better straits. Because again, I it might be just me, but when things start going super well, I'm just like start to like not take your finger off the pulse, but you're looking at what's next and you're looking upwards versus keeping your eyes on the prize, so to speak.
Yeah, I can resonate with that a lot. I really think there's a lot of wisdom in what you just said. And it would have been smart for me to do that as well.
I think it's just I don't know if it's human nature or it's just agency owner nature, but it's like you're like, oh yes, everything, like it's the ego, the confidence comes up and you look up. So I think that would be it for me. But what about for yourself? Is anything you go back and say, and how do other agency owners, especially I'm guessing, I mean we touched on a few things I think on cash flow in another podcast, but what would you go back and say, and what would you say to the guys listening now?
All right, if I could go back in time and I could do something differently, I would very much understand this in my agency. You ready for this? Rate of acceptable growth. I would just put a cap on saying how many clients I can start per month. Like, because that is like, we look for the domino or the trigger point. And when that gets out of hand, that's like the lead. So it's like, I look at it and go like, and I don't mean saying no to clients. So if a client comes in, it's like having the guts to say, look, thank you so much for having trust in us. And like, we really want to work with you, but I can't start you for 4 weeks. And the reason for that is because I've got this lined up from here, and I want to give them the attention that I want to give you. Now, what I want you to appreciate here is that like you are going to get my full attention at this point, and we do this to ensure we get a high quality. So that way you can, I suppose, systematically load clients in smoother instead of just, what I was doing. Hey guys, 3 new clients today, get to it.
I love it. I'm going to steal that. It's one of my new metrics. ROAG, guys. You heard it here first, ROAG.
Yeah, and I think the other side of it is, I know this is very hard depending on your circumstance, but I could have been better prepared with cash up front. I really could have been carrying more cash earlier into it. And I mean, I'll go back to it. For me at the time when this happened, right, I was going through this thing of like, I actually felt like a bit of a failure, in all honesty, before it, because it's like, being real, I know 10 grand a month might be a lot of money to some people, but it's like to have an agency that was doing 10 grand a month, I was kind of thinking like, what's the point? I might as well have a job. Like, it's not enough to, I suppose, it wasn't a big enough benefit for the risk I was taking. So I was like, I was still in this zone of, didn't really feel like I was providing for my wife, didn't really feel like I was going to be able to provide for kids. So like there's this provider thing going on for me that made me super hungry. And you say, how hungry were you, Charlie? Like, I worked Boxing Day as well, Kim. Like, no worries. It was like, no issues. Friends got a wedding. Don't worry about it. I'll be here at the agency. Like, I had this thing, which was like superiorly ego-driven, but it's like that was definitely there.
Mm. Yeah. No, I think that's such a great one to look at and think at and understand. And as well, but I think also there's really, if you don't have the support or people to help you, you think that's the only way, because as well, there's no reason why we couldn't have both had equal levels of growth without necessarily working those extra times. But because we didn't know it yet, we didn't have Agency Valley podcast to listen to tell us all the things, right? So it's like, cool, if we had systems and processes, etc., in place and we focused on them early on also, we could still have that, the right rate of acceptable growth, have a great ROAG percentage rather than going crazy at the time. So I think that is so important to know. It's like, yes, like obviously I think neither of us are saying that you have to pull a massive handbrake and grow at a snail's pace. a rate that is acceptable for you that still grows, as long as you have the right things in place, the right systems, mechanism, tracking, reporting, dashboard, all that sort of stuff. If that's there, then there's no reason why you can't go at a rate, but you have to keep your eyes on it and see, because sometimes a rate that worked for you this month or last month or this quarter may not be the right rate for next quarter.
Yeah, so true. You just tapped on something so important. I think back, I've actually thought about this a lot. And like, why didn't I tell the people around me that I was struggling? What was it? Is like, we were friends at this point. Like we actually were like, we'd been to a few mastermind meetups or done things. And I'm like, why didn't I tap Kim on the shoulder and say, dude, help me? Or whoever else is around us? Because like there was enough people around me that would have made that so much easier. But I didn't.
Yeah, I think I didn't either. I think it's very easy, because even if you are paying for advice and paying to be in communities and getting help, there's still something that I don't know if it's just a guy thing as well, or if it's just a business owner thing where it's like, oh no, I've got to figure it out myself, or you've got to, there's the vulnerability of then going, oh actually, I have no freaking idea what's going on. Someone help me. You know what I mean? Like there's whereas now something doesn't happen. I'm like, Charlie, tell me all the things I'm doing wrong with this. Like, please help.
But this comes back to this maturity thing. I feel like what you just said is like exact for me. Like Charlie at, let's say 22 would have been like, got to work this out myself. Trial and error, burn, work more hours. Charlie today, problem comes out. Not even going to try and solve it. I'm just going to find someone who's already solved it and say, how'd you do that?
Yeah, 100%. I think, and as you say, it's a maturity, but then also realization. I think going, okay, cool. There's no way that we can figure out and know the answer to everything. You've got to get it from someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you mentioned, podcasts like Agency Valley didn't exist. I think there's better information out there. I know you've made some amazing things, particularly with, I can't remember what you call it. Is it Agency Ballers or what's the...
Social Ballers.
Social Ballers, my bad. But it's like you've made some amazing checklists and things that I've seen. I've got, I would have killed for that when I was an agency.
When I was making them, I was like, this would have been so good for me 4 years ago. Like I was just like big smile on my face as I put it together.
Well, is there somewhere people can go to get that checklist or see any of those checklists? Or because I know you've got the Social Ballers group. Yeah,
well, we have a Certified Ballers Facebook group. Social Ballers is under lock and key. It's very secretive, but if you do hit me up on Instagram at Real Kim Barrett, I will give you, if you're an agency, I will give you a little sneaky peek.
Well, you heard it here first, guys. If you head over to Instagram, and what's your Instagram?
At Real Kim Barrett.
At Real Kim Barrett. I'll make sure we've got a link in the show notes and put it in from there. But if this is something you are interested in and you're, I guess, interested in going through this fast growth, or maybe you're in this fast growth stage, like Kim has particularly some rather, I'll just say some awesome assets I think can be helpful.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you probably, I reckon there's someone out there that's like, oh, this is me right now. And if you are that person, reach out to us. We will help you because we absolutely remember what this was like.
Exactly. Don't pull a Charlie and Kim and sit there and suffer in your jocks and suffer in silence. Get help.
Was there anything else you want to add to this episode of the podcast, Kim?
No, I think we've done a pretty good job of showing the dark side. But guys, there is always light at the end of the tunnel. And as Charlie said, either of us would be more than happy to give you guys some pointers. So don't worry, it's not all darkness. There is light.
Absolutely. There is some upside, but I think this side is the side that doesn't get spoken about enough. Well, that's it for this episode of the podcast, guys. Definitely reach out to Kim and get on his Instagram if you want to see more of that. This has been another episode of the Agency Valley podcast.